The concept of leadership red flags is important to understand. They signify the early warning signs of mental distress. As a young leader, this was something I took on board, but never really paid due diligence to until about 2 years ago. In the depths of the COVID pandemic, I realised why this lesson was so important. As small business owners, entrepreneurs, and leaders, we all have one thing in common: personal drive. You don't start a business because you lack motivation. It's quite the contrary. You do these things because you are hyper motivated at a level that strays far from sanity. You don't get to the starting line by being rational. Statistically speaking, with no experience, you're quite likely to end up worse off, or at best to achieve mediocrity, a stalemate, stuck between the path you're on and the glorious end goal you crave. It's actually irrational to expect more. The probability of creating something extraordinary is as high as that of creating something disastrous. The bell curve has two sides to it, which brings me to optimism. You have to be an optimist to start a business. The pessimists don't even open the door, let alone walk through it. With great optimism, hopes and dreams, we can do amazing things. But this choice is born out of intuition far more than rationality. It's more akin to rolling a dice, a dance with the devil. That high drive and motivation is fantastic. It's something we must have to survive startup. We need to be able to push the accelerator, move through the gears. The onus is on the founder to set the foundations, to see the first clients, build the first caseload, hire the support staff, train them, hire the clinical staff, train them too, rinse, repeat, all the while holding together one's own caseload and one's own health and well-being, and everyone else's as well, mind you. It's a lot of effort and energy expenditure, the accelerator and the brake. And when you hit those early hiccups, it's on you, the founder, to negotiate them, to find the reserves to go again and again and again. This is the skill of a startup founder. Find the accelerator pedal and press it to the floor. The difference with business post-COVID is not so much in the car you're driving as the road itself. You can still push the accelerator, get the revolutions up, get it nice and noisy, but the road isn't exactly the same. You might be used to fourth or even fifth gear, but now find yourself back in second, and it's disheartening to say the least. You normally would have just pushed it harder, overcome your next challenge and gone up into third. But the road is slippery now. The wheels slip and skid. You can't accelerate your way out of a hailstorm. In Formula One racing, they present a red flag after there's been an incident, usually a crash, and they stop the race. All the cars line up in pit lane and they wait for a restart. In business, the race never stops. We have to find a way of anticipating these crashes. We need to identify the red flag before it occurs, before our car ends up on the wrong side of the tarmac. The red flags I refer to are those putting you at risk of adverse mental health, brain health, your emotional well-being. My red flag is feeling unmotivated or underwhelmed. I'm never unmotivated. I'm always hungry for opportunity and to feel a sense of completion. If I ever feel this sense of malaise, something is usually quite wrong for me. There are a couple of pillars which I try to ensure remain stable to stay on the straight and narrow. The main one is sleep. These days I need at least 8 hours of quality sleep to function, and I protect this very seriously. I also recommend it ad nauseum. It's amazing, before kids I wasn't even bothered by lost sleep. The second one is exercise. I find when my exercise drops away, my brain health tends to slide with it. Often after being sick or having an injury, this can be very challenging. And the third one is my relationship with my partner. If ever we have a fight, my world is shaken and I struggle to focus. So in September 2021, I went through a bit of a personal crisis. It was lockdown number 6 and we were encroaching upon 200 days of home confines, stuck within my 5k radius. The year had started out quite optimistically with the birth of my first child. The months that followed had been quite testing as new parents. The cracks had started to appear from around July. This period coincided with a sustained period of sleep deprivation, Both myself and my partner struggled along, but the wheels had started to come off. The terrible trifecta. Living through COVID lockdowns, running a business, and becoming a new parent was extremely challenging. And then I still remember the day it happened. I was pushing my son's pram and talking to my business partner. We'd had a bit of a scuffle the day prior, which was quite unusual, and the phone call started with a similar tone, but ended with me breaking into tears, and the words, "I can't do this anymore," finally came sliding out. After months of inner turmoil, slamming my foot on the accelerator over and over, I was more surprised to hear the words than he was. At the time, I'd taken on the task of repairing the group's flagship clinic, as well as preparing a new startup. It was actually quite fun. But the curveball had been the lockdown and the ramping up of risk on all fronts. Single COVID cases popping up and clinics being shut for 2 weeks. Added to this was my own sense of immortality. I'd steered my team through COVID and concurrently passed the $1 million revenue mark. At the time, I'm sure I'd felt that this game was easy. However, I neglected to realise that I'd been running on adrenaline for a sustained period of time, barely sleeping over the previous 18 months. My exercise habits were non-existent, owing to gyms being shut again, and my partner was wholly consumed with managing our 8-month-old baby. I was trying to support her, but I couldn't. It was another terrible trifecta. The final nail. Before I could even look up again, my admin manager resigned with a week's notice. I'd already started the journey to pit lane. Luckily, our clinic had transitioned its front-end leadership. I knew I needed space around my son's birth, and I delegated several tasks to a senior therapist. This had gone quite well, and I'd slowly been increasing his responsibilities, then promoting him into management as I took on tasks elsewhere. What this meant was I had access to another driver, and part and parcel of the reason I was able to drive so far, so fast, and for so long. I'd found my limit though, and finally had to pull over. At the end of the day, most of my problems were in my own head. We never did get a COVID close contact, and our therapist continued to rebuild. A month on the sidelines was enough to regain clarity, but I've never really been the same ever since. That feeling of being so overworked, so exhausted, yet still fighting, it took a good 12 months to properly shake off. I came off the adrenaline hard in 2022 and really went deep into the valley. It felt like a war had been running, and suddenly we all just came home. We had had our second child later that year, and I made the decision to sell the red pill. Business, it's an addiction. I was craving the dopamine hit, that feeling of success dropping into my bucket each week. Ping! Like a pokies machine. You just play and play and play. I still crave that high. And I'm still here in the entrepreneurial sphere because of one thing. This ever-present drug, the desire to push my limits. I've taken the red pill, and there is no going back into the matrix. I wouldn't have it any other way.